Good morning and welcome to another edition of the Kitchings Table. I'm your host, Earl Kitchings. And before we get started, I'm going to just tell you like this: lock up, tighten up your seatbelt because it's going to be a ride today, let me tell you. So I hope you're ready because I'm going to bring something to you, a little something to you today that's going to really have your brain cells going, and hmm. So let's get ready. Joining me as always, my co-host here on the Kitchings Table, Miss Ronline Cannady. Ronline, good morning and good morning.
Good morning.
See how she trying to be all mild and tempered today, but it's coming. Trust me, it's coming. So recently, as we have been dealing with the fallout from so many different things since 2016, since President Barack Obama left office, and since the ex-president, and that's the only way I will title him, the ex-president left office, this has been an 8-year journey, and it's not over yet. It's not over yet. Like they say, it ain't over. So this past week, a school district's board of education in a small county in Northern Virginia, Shenandoah County, Virginia, took a step backwards. They took a step backwards. And they decided they wanted to put the names of Confederate generals back on the schools that they had taken them down from. When the George Floyd thing happened, a lot of attention got focused on the Confederate names that this country has put on schools, has erected monuments, all these different things connected to the Civil War. Here we are 160 years later, and we're still addressing things that dealt with the Civil War because you have a group of people who they say that's their legacy. They're not going to let it go. They're like bulldogs. They're not turning it loose. They're not going to turn it loose. They're going to hold on to it forever. Forever. So our topic today: what is the importance of a Confederate name? What is the importance of a Confederate name? Because it has to have some significant importance for it to continue to be an issue, for it to continue to be something we are trying to remove from our lifestyles in the year 2024. We're in a new millennium and we're still dealing with 20th century 1800 issues because people are holding on to a legacy that is over. It's been over. It's not ever, ever, ever coming back. The South will never rise again the way some of the slogans used to be. I remember growing up and seeing a few things that people would make visible to keep that mindset, that thought going forward. There used to be car tags. The first car tag was if they had the Confederate flag, the stars and bars on the tag and on the front of their car. That was one. Another tag was the South will rise again. Another one was never forget. These people are holding on to a legacy, and it's their right to hold on to it. I'm not disparaging that. It's their right. If they want to hold on to it till they take it to their grave, all well and good. But the American society as a whole does not have to continue to be a part of this stain on American history. A war between brothers, a war between states that lasted 4 years, hundreds of thousands of lives lost, much bloodshed left on the battlefield because there was this concept of slavery that did not want to be diminished, to be taken away. We're going to fight it to the end. We don't want it to go away. So what is the importance of a Confederate name? Because the Confederacy, if we were playing a Super Bowl game, and now that we're into the NBA playoffs, and now that we're into Major League Baseball, if we're playing in the championship game, and the series in basketball is the best of 7, the series in baseball is the best of 7. You get one Super Bowl, you got the playoffs leading up to it. If you don't make it to the Super Bowl, you can't play for the championship. If we looked at it from that context, if you don't win all the marbles, as the company No Fear, some of you may remember No Fear. No Fear was a apparel brand that was out back in the 90s. And I remember getting a t-shirt that had, what do you call the first loser? What do you call a first loser? The first loser, what do you call them? It's called second place. That's the first loser. If you don't win 4 out of 7 games in NBA or in Major League Baseball, you're the loser. There's no way to cut winning and losing. It's very distinctive. Either you win or you lose. And for a country that prides itself on winning, like they say, you don't remember who lost in the Super Bowl. You don't remember them unless it was something very traumatic. I think we all might remember the Buffalo Bills because, hey, they went to 4 straight Super Bowls and they lost. They lost 4 straight Super Bowls, but they lost. I don't see the people in Buffalo erecting zillions of statues about the Buffalo Bills because they didn't win it all. But people who believe in this 160-year-old legacy can't let it go. So here's my question. Ronline. Because they want to put the names of Confederate generals back on the names of the school in this county in Northern Virginia. When I first read the article, I thought it was the state of Virginia doing this, but it's just one county wanting to do this. So let's keep it very clear. It's one county who have made the decision to put these Confederate names back on these schools. If these schools mean so much to those who want their names to remain on them, why do more Black students attend these schools and more white students attend the private schools? And that's a general question throughout all America. People who keep talking about keeping up these memorials, or they don't want the names of these Confederate generals or officers to come down, these schools no longer have the rich tradition of a predominantly white enrollment. A lot of them, these schools have, because they were in the inner city for the most part, because they have moved from the inner city to the suburbs. But you still want the name of that school to stay because you feel that it's disrespecting your legacy. Well, send your kids to that school. Since you want it so bad, but you're not doing that. You're creating all these private schools. You got all these, I don't hear them naming. I haven't heard one charter school named after Confederate general. Has there been one?
Not that I know of.
For all you people who want charter schools and for all the money you are ushering off into charter schools, I haven't heard one Confederate name placed on a charter school. Why is that? If you want it so bad, you're fighting to have the names removed, but I don't hear you wanting, since Since a charter school does not have to abide by the policies of that public school system, since they don't have to abide, they don't have to do the test, they don't have to abide by anything. They can do their own thing. And the money just flows to it like an open tap. Well, name some of those charter schools in the name of those fallen heroes that you want to name schools after who finished second in the war. They're the first losers of the Civil War. Name some of those charter schools after those Confederate people. I don't hear you doing that. You want to keep it on the public schools, take the public school money. Black kids are going to the public schools in higher proportions, but yet you want to keep that name on that school that you don't even go and attend a football game, or you don't even deal with that school anymore. You just don't want the name to come down. What is the importance of these Confederate names? And here's another question, Ronline. Here's another question. Why are there minimal amounts of schools named for generals or other military officers of the Union Army from the Civil War? Why don't we hear more Union generals from the Civil War? Why don't we hear their names on schools? And why don't we see as many monuments of them since they won? They won the Super Bowl, they won the NBA championship, they won it, but they didn't go around putting up all these monuments like they did in the South. From Richmond, for those of you who may or may not know it, Richmond was the capital of the Confederacy. Jefferson Davis was the president of the Confederacy. Robert E. Lee was the most outstanding general of the Confederacy. Robert E. Lee went to West Point. For those of you who may not know, Robert E. Lee went to West Point. Before there was a Civil War, everything was, even though they may not have agreed with it, but the scholars of learning war tactics and battle skills and battle tactics, if they really wanted to be a military person, they went to West Point, the United States Military Academy, USMA. And I guess if you wanted to really be that standout person on the oceans or the sea, you went to the Naval Academy. If you wanted to be on naval vessels or sailing ships or things of that nature, they had some very unique ships back in the Civil War days. Not only did they have the wooden ships, but they had what they called the ironclad ships, were made out of straight metal. So why aren't there more Union? You would think there would have been more Union officers with their names on schools as opposed to Confederate officers. But in the South, that legacy, Now, what I found out, Ronline, was this: that in a way to appease, you beat them, but then you want to come back and appease them. To appease the people of the South, you decided to name schools some military bases. President Franklin Roosevelt's administration, I'm quoting this from an article I read, I think it came out of not Wikipedia, the New York Times, in an article I read. But, quote, Roosevelt administration named some of these forts after Confederate officers to court Southern votes and secured the support of Southern Democrats for World War II. It is written that Delano Roosevelt, the president that was the president for the New Deal, and his wife helped Tuskegee Airmen. I mean, he had a very diverse tenure in office. Said FDR once called Robert E. Lee one of the greatest American Christians and one of our greatest American gentlemen. Now, Robert E. Lee may have been those things. Robert E. Lee was the top general for the Confederacy, and they lost. As a matter of fact, he did what you see people do in boxing. He threw in the towel. He conceded. He surrendered. We give. We stop. We don't want to fight no more. We're done. We don't have the resources nor the manpower. So we're going to go ahead and take a deal. It goes on to say that individuals are difficult to separate from their ideologies. When you name an army installation after him, you're celebrating him as a military man, which is to say, as a traitorous general who fought for slavery, America's single greatest moral failure. That's what this says. When you continue to run the flag up the flagpole in the name of naming these military installations and these schools. And when I went and looked up some of these installations, and they're located mostly in the South, it was interesting to see that U.S. military bases formerly named in honor of Confederate military leaders, all in former Confederate states. They were all renamed in 2023, but before that, Fort Benning, named for Confederate General Henry Benning. Fort Bragg, Confederate General Braxton Bragg. Fort Gordon, named for Confederate General John Brown Gordon. Fort A.P. Hill, Confederate General A.P. Hill. Fort Hood, Confederate General John Bell Hood out in Texas. In Prince George County, Virginia, and Prince George County is one of the most well-endowed counties in America, if not the. Prince George County, Virginia. Fort Lee, named after Confederate General Robert E. Lee. Fort Pickett, named after General George Pickett. Fort Polk, named after Leonidas Polk, Confederate General. And then Fort Rucker out in Alabama, named after Confederate General Edmund Rucker. That's 9 military installations that had the names of Confederate generals that in 2023, they said, well, we need to rename these because people are, a little bit upset. But then there were 3 more. And like I said, from Alabama, Louisiana, Virginia, Texas, Virginia, Georgia, and Virginia had the most. Camp Pendleton, Confederate Brigadier General William Pendleton, that's located in Virginia Beach. Camp Maxey out in Paris, Texas, Confederate Brigadier General Samuel Maxey, and Coach Camp Beauregard, named after Confederate General Pierre Gustave Toutant Beauregard. There are others. I'm not going to go into the others. However, that is what part of the reasoning is, so that they could court the votes of the people in the South. So we'll let you name these facilities, erect these monuments, as a trade-off. This is what you want, this is what you get. So as the Army continues to rename them, then we talk about the schools. And let me tell you what I found out about the schools in this situation, because the names of the schools, the most common Confederate names for schools, 41 schools in America. And once upon a time, Ronline, there were 340 schools in 21 states that bear the names of Confederate figures and or generals. 340. 340. At the top of the list, Robert E. Lee with 41. Thomas Lubbock, which is Lubbock, Texas, is named after him, had 18. Lucius Lamar, 15. Augustus Garland, 12. Sidney Lanier, 12. There's a lake up in Atlanta called Lake Sidney Lanier. Samuel Pasco, 11. John Tyler, 10. Stonewall Jackson, 9. Nathan Bedford Forrest, the originator of the Ku Klux Klan, 8. And Jefferson Davis, 8. Those are the school names that bear the most. Schools named after these Confederate generals or figures. What is it about these names that is so critically important that they must be maintained even into 2024, 160 years after the Confederates lost in the Civil War? They surrendered. We are still dealing with this issue. And now you want Black children and other children of color to go to these schools, attend these schools, and when they graduate, feel good about graduating from Stonewall Jackson and Robert E. Lee and Nathan Bedford Forrest high schools? What? Come
As the
on,
question said, as the question is, who does that?
who does that? Well, folks who want the legacy of these former Confederate generals, former individuals who bought and sold slaves. And oh, by the way, for the governor of Florida who thought slavery was a benefit, okay, when you buy and sell people, that's not a benefit, man. So,
Wait a minute.
as
Just say that. I need you to say that, to ask that question again. First, make the statement about the benefit that came from that he allowed to be written into textbooks or to go forward with. Back to you.
well, you talk about the Confederacy, the Confederate names that these schools have. What is the purpose and why is it so important? Uh, if a governor can make the comment that slavery was a good thing for those who were enslaved, when
And hold on. And I want you to talk about the time era that this came out of. This not something that happened that was said 160 years ago. We're
no
talking about, tell it.
this happened this year or a part of last year. I mean 2023, 2024, the governor of the
In the
state of Florida.
21st century. Yeah, in the 21st century,
Yeah,
state
in
of
the new
Florida.
millennium. Yeah. I mean, you're making these kind of statements and comments, but again, the question is, white students are going to schools in the suburbs. Black students are going to the schools for the most part in the inner city, and the schools that were in the inner city bear the name of these Confederate generals and the like. But a lot of the white students don't attend them, but their parents or their family members are out here fighting, wanting to keep these names, but their children don't attend these schools. So what's the point? What's the
Right.
point? I
They're
mean,
sending their children. Yeah, they're sending their children elsewhere. But the point that I wanted you to go back to was this. We're in the 21st century. 22, 23, 24. All of this is being said and taught now that slavery was a benefit. The people's back was the benefit. So it's like, okay, and this is a governor of this time of the 21st century that's representing all of the people of the state of Florida that has allowed this kind of mentality, because he's thinking it, go forth. And so, what does that say about our nation? What does that say about the people that we have elected to these governmental government offices to be able to change policies? It's supposed to be changing policies for the better, but I can't see how we're going to benefit for the better with this kind of foolishness going on. So, what's the solution? What do you recommend be the solution? And that's what we're talking about today.
Well, in this day and time, solutions are very scarce because when you talk about people who are in control of our legislatures, school boards, city governments, when they are so determined to uphold the thinking of people who still want to live in a day and time that goes back to a day when slavery was a part of the fabric of America. As it stated, one of the worst failures of this country was the fact that the Civil War happened, and it did such irreparable harm. So it's not going to change anytime soon. It seems like, if we're talking about taking things backwards, when people are stuck in a time warp of thinking 160 years ago that was a good time and we need to go back to that. That was a good time for who? For you, but not for this day and time. When we think about the fact that Liberty, who stands watch and guard on the harbor that brings you to America, that she stands with a torch bearing, and you say, bring me your poor, your deprived. When you ask for diversity, and diversity was already here, but you ask for more diversity, you want the diversity to be of other cultures that don't have color. That's what you want. You want, other countries, European countries, to bring the diversity, but you can't. That's a biasness. That's not what liberty is supposed to be. Liberty is supposed to be freedom for all. And as I've stated before, liberty and justice for who?
Oh.
So when we look at what's going on in Virginia, Shenandoah County in Virginia, let me just quickly give you some of the quick statistics. There are 2,093 public schools in Virginia. There are 1.19 students in Virginia, and 20% of the population of Virginia, and there are 8.7 million people who make up the population of Virginia. 20% of that population is Black, which is 1.75 million. So when you start looking at numbers, 2,093 schools, 1.19 students, 320,000 plus students are Black, 722,000 plus students are white. And when you start talking about, we want to go back and putting the names back on these schools that serve those individuals who lost, I started doing a comparison. I gave you the names of the schools that bear the names of Confederates. Here's some of the names of schools, popular Black heroes, sheroes, but here are some of the popular names of schools where they've named after Black individuals. Paul Laurence Dunbar, the poet; Booker T. Washington, the founder of Tuskegee Institute; George Washington Carver, the great scientist who had so many things come out of his scientific research of the peanut; and then Frederick Douglass. finally, Martin Luther King Jr. Those are probably the most prominent names of schools named after Black individuals. There are others, but these are the more prominent names. So you can take down the Confederate names and put up more positive named individuals for white heroes or white individuals who make a positive impact. Uh, the names of these Confederate individuals who were slave owners and fought to keep slavery as a part of America. We need to be past that now. If like they said, if you want this to be a part of your culture, build your museum and put it in your museum, but it doesn't need to be part of military bases and school that taxpayers, that Black taxpayers' taxes pay for too. That shouldn't be a part of what's going on. So, this is where we are, and this is what's going on. Virginia, ironically, is the state where this is happening. There are not a lot of schools named after Ulysses S. Grant, and I did some research to find out what are some of the names of the top 10 U.S. Union Army generals from the Civil War. Ulysses
hold
S.
that thought. Let's hold that, and let's thank the people for tuning in today.
Well, this is the Kitchings Table, and we'd like to thank you for tuning in today. We hope that today's topic is bringing you some insight, bringing you some reason to give pause and give some thinking and thoughts, and so that when you hear these issues happening in your community, you will at least have some information. So thank you all for tuning in to the Kitchings Table. We bring this to you every Tuesday morning at 10 o'clock. I'm your host, W.R. Kitchings, along with my co-host, Ronline, Cannady. We're definitely thankful and proud to bring you this opportunity to hear what we have to say and bring about points of interest that maybe make sense or make a point, however you want to spin it. But that's what we do here at the Kitchings Table. So, Ronline, I'm going to let you weigh in a little bit before I give you these Union General names that schools are not so populated with across the country.
So I have questions.
Sure.
I know how I felt about the school that I attended for high school, and I looked back at some other issues that was going on, and I'm just thankful to say that, and I believe that was the same for you too, that we have schools that we can be proud of. But when I think about some of the schools that other people that have gone to, like my cousins, to the Robert E. Lees and all of the other ones that's out there. And when they thought about when the names being removed, they were so happy and so relieved and was wondering, like, why hadn't that happened sooner? So for them to look forward to, okay, I can send my children, I can send my grandchildren, I can feel good about sending them to these new schools. Well, these same schools, but with new names. That stigma is gone away. They don't have to come through that same stigma that we have on our diplomas that's our lifetime. So with that being said, now to revert back for this one county. And of course, we know that if this one county gets this passed, then there are going to be many counties that's going to be fighting for the same thing. So what's the temperature on that?
Well, they've just started this one initiative to put the names back on the schools. One of the things that may be a deterrent is the finances of, it costs them to take those former names off the schools and rename them. So now it's going to cost you again to go back. And then if you want to change them back and take the names off again. So the monetary aspects of this can become quite intense. And the communities, this is a kind of a predominantly white community, but for whatever reason, the temperature of the state and of the country was like, we need to take these names off these schools, because if the shoe was on the other foot and your child did not feel comfortable going to the name of a school that was named after a Black Confederate general, had that been the case, well, what would have happened if one of these schools were named, if there was a Black Confederate general and you named it after the Black Confederate general? And now you're like, well, we don't want his name on the school, but he was one of your heroes. I mean, what's the problem? Well, it couldn't have been too many Black Confederate generals because you were fighting for those Black people in the South to stay in slavery. So that kind of, wasn't going to happen. So the temperature as it is right now, we have to stay guarded and we have to stay abreast of what's going on. And when I looked at the fact that there are the top 10 Union Army generals during the Civil War, when I looked at and tried to find information on how many schools are named after some of these guys, and there, it wasn't the same amount of information that just popped up. It was like the Confederate general names popped up quite often, but the Union Army generals, even on some of the military bases, it's not as prominent. So the most revered Union Army general, who also became the president, was Ulysses S. Grant. I'm looking at 4 schools named after Ulysses S. Grant, and maybe others, but 2 of them in Oregon, 1 in Oklahoma, and 1 in Illinois. William Sherman. Sherman's march from wherever he was up in Virginia, his march through Atlanta that drove the Confederates to the Atlantic Ocean. There's 1 elementary school, named after him. George Custer, Union general who is famously known for the Little Bighorn and his troops being basically wiped out at the Little Bighorn, and I think that was Montana, if I'm not mistaken, where that happened. But there's a high school in Custer, South Dakota. So those are the 3. But then there were Robert Anderson, Ambrose Burnside, Winfield Scott, George Thomas, Winfield Hancock, Joseph Hooker, George McClellan. I didn't find many schools named after these guys. There weren't many military bases. So the fact that we won the war and we'll make a concession, we'll let you name we put names of some of your Confederate generals on military bases. Definitely we'll let you put them on schools. We'll definitely let you name your schools after some of these guys. And of course, interesting enough, when we talk about who owned and had slaves, they go back to talk about George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Andrew Jackson, famously known for being a great military strategist, but he is the person behind the Trail of Tears, where you were wiping out the Native Americans and you sent them from the South to Oklahoma. So everything is about, as we are in this day and time now, power, money, greed. You just got to have things because you want them your way. You don't take into account the diversity of where we are. And in this diverse time, folks just aren't, we're going backwards. I mean, diversity, when you look at some of the things that have helped diversity come to the forefront, and have helped people, maintain or elevate themselves, but yet you talk about wanting to take things backwards. So going back to this county in Virginia, Shenandoah County, the population of that county is 45,000 people. 3% of that county is Black. Overall, 10% of that population is minority. So about 4,500 minorities live in the entire county, and they decided to reverse a decision After the George Floyd killings prompted nationwide demands for racial reckoning, they decided, well, we're going to go back. We're going to take Mountain View High School in Quicksburg, Virginia, and we're going to put Stonewall Jackson's name back on it because that's what we want. Stonewall Jackson. You got to have Stonewall. We need, and I saw something online where this little elementary school girl was saying that she wasn't going to feel good about graduating from a school named Stonewall Jackson. She was a little black girl, and she addressed the school board and said she wasn't going to feel good about graduating from a school named Stonewall Jackson based on the history of Stonewall Jackson and these Confederate generals. I mean, again, they were maybe seen as good people in the eyes of the Confederate and the Confederacy during that time, but it's 160 years later. Let it go. If it was a negative state, let it go. I mean, let's go to the positive and move away from the negative.
Yes, I was I consulted chat CPT, the AI, because I wanted to know, okay, what kind of things I was going to get back when I asked, based on what you just said, what happens to the African American psyche when they're keep being faced with the reminder of what happened to their ancestors and where we are today, and the answers that came back, the reminder of systemic racism, the disparities of healthcare, all of these things just go hand in hand, and so just looking at that and the things that we have discussed here and the research that you have done, it's like, okay, do we keep wanting to spread that cancer? How can we stamp that cancer out? That's the thing that we need to be thinking about. And then, when we talk about the money that has to go into this, this fuel pot, if you will, can't that money be used for something else, such as the school lunch program, making sure that every child is able to have a meal or two while they're in school to keep their brain functioning, to be able to keep them concentrating on their lesson plan so that they can pass these tests and pass to the next grade and be able to eventually be ready for college. But we're spending money to change the names of schools that is a reminder of the cancer that we're trying to come away from. We're trying to heal the country. At least that's what I thought.
Well, their mindsets that aren't interested in healing, interested in self-serving. We want what we want for us and our people. So
Right.
when we talk about diversity and moving forward, it's hard to move forward when you're stuck in reverse. I've never seen a car go forward when you've got it in reverse gear. So even in neutral gear, you can push it forward. But if it's stuck in reverse, it's never going forward. And then you brought up a good point, because in 2002, the No Child Left Behind Act was established by former President George W. Bush, which was a law to make sure that the schools provided proficiency for all students in this country. The goal of this was to raise the testing proficiency levels of all students. And if you want to compete on a worldwide platform, you need to make sure that all your students can compete. And here's the other part, Ronline. If everyone partakes in the dynamics of being a part of, if everyone can participate, everything's going to get better, and it's going to help everybody, not just a few. But when you only want to believe that yours is the only one that should benefit, and we're not going to allow anyone else to participate, then everybody loses. I don't care how you cut it, look at it, everybody loses. So today, that's what I wanted to bring forth, that folks want to turn things backwards. This is the first county that has done this. They voted on it. And let's be clear, not everyone in the county wanted this. White, black, and others. Not everybody in the county wanted it. So we'll see how this goes. But that was my point for today, because we continue to talk about diversity and wanting inclusion, but yet the rule of thumb seems to be exclusion. And as long as we have exclusion and don't want to deal with the realities, the truth, as they say, the truth will set you what?
Free.
But when you don't want to deal in truth, we're going to live in, as the ex-president so wellly does, he lives on lies. And if you're a minion of that, you live on lies too. So we're going to move on and let Ronline do her Black History moment of the day. Ronline, who you got for us today?
Well, I have two people today, and both of them are of Virginia. So some of you may know or remember Governor Douglas Wilder, and some of you may remember the professional tennis player, Arthur Ashe. And here's the little bit that I want to say about each one of them. Both of them were activists in their own way. The former Congressman Lawrence Douglas Wilder, he was the first African American to serve as the U.S. state since the Reconstruction era. And he was also the first African American elected as governor. So think about he's 93 years old now. Just think about the many fights that he has been a part of, trying to make sure that that word justice was served, that he did right by his state that he served. To be a servant that is moving a needle into the capacity, especially in the Reconstruction era, to get it to where we are today, and hoping that other people will be able to come along to be able to pick up that baton and carry it forward, instead of having us to be carried backwards. Now, Arthur Ashe, he had a lot of firsts going on as well, and we want to recognize him. He was the first African American to win the singles titles at the Wimbledon, in the U.S. Open, and the Australian Open. As we know, that he died way too soon, because of the disparities of healthcare. Could not get what he needed, and he became an activist for it. Let things be known. So is this fight over? No, as we know, we're here in 2024. We're seeing, just with the names of schools, of resurrecting names that does not represent this country in a positive light. So my hat goes off to the former governor, Douglas Wilder, and my hat goes off to Arthur Ashe. And may it be that Arthur Ashe did not die for nothing. Hopefully, the things that needs to be done as far as everything that this cancer has been spreading through our country, will one day, someday, and hopefully soon, die. All right, I'll turn it back over to you to close us out, Earl Kitchings.
Ronline, I'll just close this out by saying Arthur Ashe was my inspiration in learning how to play tennis. So kudos to him. Kudos to Douglas Wilder for becoming the first Black governor of a state. Ironically, in Virginia, Arthur Ashe was from Richmond. He fought through some things, but he is revered in Richmond, Virginia, his hometown, as not only an outstanding tennis player, but also as an activist. So we thank you for that. We thank you to everyone who took time out of their day to tune into the show. We hope that something was of value to you today, and we hope that you continue to follow us, because we are always wanting to be on the front edge of things like this. Until next week, until we bring you another edition of the Kitchings Table, for Ronline Cannady, I'm W. Earl Kitchings saying take care. And as we say every week, do something good for somebody else today. Take care. Have a great week, everybody.